If you're enjoying this podcast to the point where you're inspired to make your own, first of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Have you heard about Anchor by Spotify? It's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Anchor has tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hello, friends and family, strangers and acquaintances, my future children, and my future self. Like clockwork, life has delayed the release of this entry, as much as I wanted to get this out when it was newly happening. As you can tell by the title, we are talking about the overturning of Roe V Wade by the Supreme Court of the United States. I hesitate making an entire entry based on politics, but this is simply a human rights issue that has been highly politicized. And I believe it is important to talk about it and not stay silent. It is absolutely unacceptable to be moving backwards in 2022. This affects everyone, not just women, not just people with uteruses, not just people assigned female at birth, not just intersex people, everyone. So, let's get into that and go all in. So normally I like to find some sort of clever intro into these things, but in light of recent events and the severity of this subject, I feel like that would be misplaced and a bit inappropriate maybe. So let's just cut to the chase. Roe v. Wade has been overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States. Lex, I must know. Well, I do know, but I must know. How do you feel about this?
Not particularly happy about it.
Yeah, neither am I.
Yeah. No. Not great.
Normally, we try not to, or at least I try not to, make an entire entry about a political topic. But, I mean, I think you agree with me in that this is not a political topic. This is a human rights issue.
Yeah, I'd agree that it's a human rights issue that's been politicized. Roe versus Wade shouldn't be political.
No, it shouldn't. And we definitely shouldn't have gone backwards.
Oh, yeah, no.
This
Especially
decision
not.
takes us backwards.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Super annoying. Not cool.
We are raising children that have less rights than we had.
Yeah, definitely.
And there are people who originally fought for Roe v. Wade that still remember doing that are now back in the same spot.
I know, that makes me really sad. That makes me really upset. That's like one of the first things I thought when I heard the news. I was like, wow, that must fucking suck. Like,
right.
A lot. Like, to be there and now to be here and kind of just be like, what the hell happened? Basically.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's just awful.
So do you want to talk a little bit about, pro-life versus pro-choice? And
I'm fine with that if you're fine with that.
well, I'm definitely fine with that. I'm mostly asking your perspective as a woman.
Well, I'm pro-choice.
Yes. So what does pro-choice mean to you? Because
like personally, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty fundamentally that regardless of whether or not somebody anybody feels that abortion is wrong or right, that everybody should have autonomy over their own body and the choice to make whatever decision they feel is right for them. That, like, if I wouldn't want to be afraid of, potentially having that medically necessary procedure taken away.
Exactly. I feel like pro-choice is, out of those two options, pro-life versus pro-choice, the only option where both can still exist. Like, you can be pro-life all you want if you don't ever want to have like an abortion or whatnot. That's fine, but that is a choice you have made because of your beliefs and your values and whatnot. Don't take that choice away from someone who believes differently from you.
Yeah. And I've met quite a few, actually, pro-choice women who wouldn't get an abortion themselves if they were to become unexpectedly pregnant, but don't want to take that right away from other women who would make that decision for themselves. And I've had very recent conversations about that, especially in light of Roe versus Wade being overturned.
Right.
What would you do in this situation?
Right. Yeah, luckily we live in the state of New Jersey, where I'm pretty sure I saw our governor, Phil Murphy himself, on TikTok. And he was explaining how he signed something into law that he was both disappointed about, but also proud he signed into law. He was disappointed because he had to do this, but also proud that because he knew it was the right choice, and that was basically giving like protection to people that come to New Jersey for abortions.
That's good.
And like, those sorts of medical services, like they can't be extradited, their information can't be passed on.
Yeah, which is the right thing to do. New Jersey was one of the states that had laws in place that would, if Roe versus Wade were to get overturned, would basically roll over. New Jersey would still honor the previous system.
Right, and not all states are, that lucky.
No, definitely not. Most states didn't have like legislature like just waiting in the back burner for this sort of thing to happen, because they thought it wasn't going to, or whether they're waiting in the wings to have their own opposite laws put in place, I guess is to be seen. But it's scary for the people that have to cross like many states potentially to get the care that they need. And that's scary on a lot of levels. Financially, you're not only is your health being impacted, but you're being potentially impacted financially and it's like mentally and
right. It's potentially a time sensitive thing.
Yeah, and it's putting undue stress on the woman and potentially the woman's partner and like that's just a terrible position to put women into.
Absolutely.
Like just so awful.
Yeah, and I know I shared with you the story about a 10-year-old girl in Ohio who I believe she had to travel to Indiana to get an abortion.
It's fucking disgrace.
Because Ohio's trigger laws wouldn't make an exception for rape.
It's awful. That was terrible to read because it was like she's 10, a literal child.
Right.
Like, terrible. It's like, if that doesn't scream Handmaid's Tale, I don't know what does.
So I'm not a watcher of Handmaid's Tale, but I've heard a bit of it from you.
Love Handmaid's Tale.
What, for people like me who don't watch it, like what is Handmaid's Tale and how does it relate to what's going on now?
Well, bare minimum, women have basically no reproductive rights whatsoever. And women are really put into three categories. You're either a Martha, which is a servant. You're a servant, essentially. Or you're a wife, these are the women that have the most power in this society. However, they still lack sufficient power because they're not allowed to like read or write or anything like that. But they're basically trophy wives, essentially. They don't. This is also important. Handmaid's Tale is in a society a little bit dystopian in the way that most of the people aren't able to reproduce. Like women, a lot of women aren't able to carry babies to term or carry at all, and a lot of the men are infertile. But at least from the show's perspective, it seems more of a woman's issue in the way that the women that are able to carry and conceive and bring healthy babies into the world are handmaids, which are given to a wife and her husband, a commander, who these commanders are like in charge of like this whole country, basically Gilead, which is a biblical based country, a country based 100% completely on the Bible. And it's a dystopian, like fallen United States. It's like if the United States were to fall to like religious zealots, basically. And that's what Handmaid's Tale is about. And the handmaids are given to the commanders so they can basically like essentially rape them and have children, because more or less it's never consensual in the show. It's like consensual only in the way that if you don't do this, your alternative is basically death. So it's like that's not real consent, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of it kind of relates to what's right and what's wrong in terms of how much power can women have over their own bodies. In Handmaid's Tale, it's an exaggeration of what potentially could happen. I think Margaret Atwood even said, though, in an interview at one point, that everything that happens in The Handmaid's Tale has happened at one point or another, or is currently happening now, which makes it even more terrifying when you put it in those terms.
Shit, that's scary.
It's very scary, and I'm sure she's right, more or less. I don't think it's very difficult to see that, like, the parallels between Handmaid's Tale and like the implications of what the overturn of Roe versus Wade could mean. It's hard to, with 4th of July passing, it's hard to be proud of a country that did something like that basically made every woman and then every person with a uterus.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
This is trying to, as we always do, be as inclusive as we can, which includes in our language, this is not just a women's rights issue. This includes AFAB, assigned female at birth, intersex people, just overall. This is a human rights because it affects men too.
Yeah, of course.
Men have sisters, wives,
daughters,
girlfriends.
Yeah,
daughters,
cousins,
aunts,
female people
uncles
in your life,
right?
Or people with vaginas in your life that don't identify as
if you're a man
female,
and you think this doesn't affect you, think again.
Oh,
this very much affects you. This affects everyone.
It does affect everyone, and it's honestly really disappointing how some men really I don't understand how some men think that this doesn't have anything to do with them.
Some men are just very short-sighted in that way, unfortunately.
And I think the problem with it is it doesn't directly affect them sometimes, so they don't give two shits.
Right.
Until it does.
And then it's too late.
Until it's your wife.
Right.
Or your partner.
Right.
Or your mother or your sister.
Right.
That man doesn't necessarily care.
Right.
And at that point, it's like you said, too late sometimes.
Right. Sort of going back to the 10-year-old girl and about how I think Ohio's laws, the trigger laws don't make exception for cases of rape. First of all, why?
It's despicable.
I would think that even if you had trigger laws, if Roe v Wade were overturned, I would still have that clause there that if anyone is raped, they shouldn't have to conceive that child
or carry that child.
Or
Like,
carry that child.
Yeah, like, because conception really isn't necessarily up to the woman, but but carrying the child should be.
Right.
I think that's awful, and I think it really brings into question, if rape is a gray area, then what about things like miscarriage, where people do essentially, what doctors would do essentially what is an abortion to make sure that the cells and everything in the lining of the uterus is like back to like the previous state before a baby was conceived. So what happens in that case? Or what happens in the case of like an ectopic pregnancy, where there's no way in hell that they are going to conceive and carry that child without essentially killing themselves, because it's like you can't.
What is an ectopic pregnancy?
When a baby is basically growing outside of the womb. So
that's very dangerous, right?
You could see where that would be a problem.
Yeah.
And what about those cases? Like, that should be like, oh, this will never be a viable pregnancy. So why are we talking as if it is? But it brings in the question those sorts of gray areas, because what does it mean for those sorts of situations? Because if a mother miscarries her child and that is left unattended, that could cause potentially infection and sickness and death.
Right.
So, like, the body can expel all of those things. Like, obviously that is potentially a possibility, but there's also a good possibility that it won't. So
yeah,
what do you do then?
Yeah, I really like what, I think he's from Texas. I forget if he's a senator or whatnot, or he's some sort of politician, Pete Buttigieg, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but I love what he said. I'm going to paraphrase it. We've gotten so caught up in where we draw the line that we've forgotten to stop and think about who gets to draw that line, and how this is something that people may seek spiritual guidance, they may seek medical guidance, but it won't help if like the government is like meddling in that business.
Yeah. I don't think it has much to do with the government. I understand like overturning Roe versus Wade just is basically giving the power back to the states. But I think it's problematic in the way that there are women who live in states that, they may or may not align one way politically, but in a lot of ways you don't really get to choose where you're born, and you don't always necessarily have the means to get the fuck out of the place you were born at. So
right, yeah, like some people can't just
up and move,
or not even necessarily move, but like take time off work to travel. Like you said, potentially across multiple states.
Yeah,
especially with gas prices so high. Some people may not even have a vehicle.
Yeah, and to be fair, like there are organizations that are preparing, and I'm sure potentially as of right now have helped women, but the problem is, and a worry of mine is definitely how many people are really willing to help, and how many resources do these people helping have, and is it enough? Because I definitely fear that it may not be, potentially. And I think that while maybe unfounded currently, it's kind of to be seen. And it's definitely a frustrating thing that it's even something we have to consider, we have to talk about. And I don't like that. I don't like that we have to even think about this. Like, as a cis woman should just be able to go wherever the fuck I feel necessary to be able to get like the care that I need when it comes to like going to a hospital or a clinic or whatever. Like, it just really like disheartening that the place that you live, the country that you live in, like would do this to pretty much anybody who has a vagina, like in this country. And that, it's not a great time. Like,
No.
it's like you just essentially took away a lot of people's freedom, like,
Yeah.
and like their choice.
Right. Because, again, like I said in the beginning, like, pro-choice includes even people who are pro-life who want to make the choice to not get abortions. Like, it's just, for me, it's all about inclusivity.
Yeah.
And then one side is very exclusive.
Yeah.
And borderline not even right. If you're really pro-life, really, it's really you're pro-birth.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
You're pro-birth. Yeah. And obviously it's not like that for everybody, but a large narrative, the larger narrative of pro-life people tends to be based in religion, and also like, oh, like they focus so much on, oh, there are other avenues, other ways of, having a child, and like you can do this, and never stopping to consider that maybe this woman, period, doesn't want a child at all. Like never to, like, because sometimes whether people like this or not, some people don't view children as a blessing. They don't view it as, like, some people view it as a hardship, or some people view it as something to be, handled, not.
Yeah, and there will be people out there that just heard the statement you just made and will never be able to wrap that around their heads.
Oh,
will
yeah,
never be able
of
to
course.
fathom that, because to them, my child is like the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
And of course, but that's their viewpoint, right?
Right. It's like, that's your viewpoint, and
there are some people who don't want children.
People think differently.
Yeah, like, I want children, but to be quite honest, like, if we were to have, I got pregnant and, oops, we had an accident type situation, we wouldn't be having that baby. It would not be happening. Not right now.
Right.
We're not ready for that.
No, we're not.
And I've definitely, like, we've talked about this. I'm definitely not at all, like, hiding that fact from anybody. I'll tell that to anybody who asks me.
Right.
But I want to be able to make that choice. But the fact of the matter is, other people will make different choices. But, that's not the choice I would necessarily make.
Yeah. See, this is all like just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because
if you were really pro-life, you would advocate for things like, I don't know, universal health care, or
maybe a better foster care system that doesn't lose children in the thousands.
Right. Also, perhaps stricter gun laws, because
so people don't have to die like at the 4th of July parade that just happened.
That, or even, you're learning math in school and active shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll never forget, one of my Facebook friends posted one sentence and it nearly took the wind out of me. This was right when Roe V Wade was overturned. I'm pretty sure this was the day of. And this person just said, well, they needed to replace the kids somehow.
Yep.
Something along those lines. Terrible.
Right?
Terrible.
It's awful. Similarly, not exactly in that same vein, but one of the first few things that went through my head was that unborn female fetuses have more rights than women currently alive right now.
Right.
or people with uteruses alive.
And also
right
the flip side of that, I've heard, a dead corpse has more rights than
it's great.
anyone with a uterus.
Love that. Great.
Yeah. And if you don't know what I mean by that, it's there. I'm pretty sure they're talking about the example of being an organ donor. You have to specifically say you are an organ donor. I think when you're signing up for your license,
I think so. Yeah.
that they could harvest your organs if you were to pass away. They need your consent for that. They're not just going to do it
Just because somebody else needs something.
right. Even if like you're like a perfect match, you still have your own bodily autonomy even after you've
passed away.
You've passed away.
Yeah.
To say, nope, you can't have my organs. But that same concept of bodily autonomy is being chipped away at, and Roe v. Wade is one big chip.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, makes me pretty mad.
Yeah,
overall.
I mean that's super understandable. Why it would make anyone mad. This affects everyone. Period.
Yeah, it does.
A little bit of in a lighter tone. There was this one TikTok that I saw that was like, all right, bet. Let's put in this clause now. If you really want to force women or anyone with a uterus to carry a baby, fine, whatever. But if the mother dies, the father also dies, is executed. So that now both parents' lives are at stake. And it's not just one or the other. And then the TikToker went on to say, oh, does that sound a little barbaric to you? To, have the government, like, essentially execute you just because you had sex one time and got pregnant because of it? Yeah, it does. It does sound barbaric.
Yep.
Yet, here we are where, isn't there like some states where, I'm pretty sure I saw some sort of case where they're trying to like give the death penalty to someone who had an abortion. And I'm just like, what? How what in the pro-life bullshit is this?
I feel like people who that's ridiculous, first off, but also like it's kind of insane that like I don't know, like that why don't people focus more on like education, on educating people when it comes to having safe sex and taking precautions and just like being knowledgeable about sex, because I feel like a lot of the problem with like not like so much like accidental pregnancy, because sometimes you do everything right and things just go wrong, or go the way you don't necessarily want them to. That can happen to anybody, right? But when it comes to like other kinds of pregnancy, like teen pregnancies and things like that, a lot of that's just because people don't know anything and you're just experimenting.
Well, first of all, that's another tip of the iceberg, the whole education system as a whole, and then specifically sex ed.
Yeah.
But,
or lack thereof, abstinence only education.
Right. That's that leads me to my next point. I think some people just fear that like educating young people about sex is equal to exposing them to sex, which is then equal to making them want to do it.
What I really think it's like the opposite. It's like when you don't share things with particularly teenagers.
That's how teen pregnancy happens.
Yeah, because they're curious and they want to keep it. They think it's a secret and it's like a thing they have to figure out. And isn't it better that they find out through like a trusted adult?
Right. They think it's like an adult thing, well, which it is. But I mean, you remember being that age where like you just want to be an adult, like
and also like
so badly.
And if I'm being honest, as long as the people involved are either of age or of the same age when it comes, being like maybe 15, 16, 17, around that, that kind of time frame, I feel like that's a perfectly fine time to be having sex. I don't think like a 17-year-old or a 16-year-old should be having sex with someone much older. Of course not. But, when it's like someone of your same age group, I think that's fair. And like, that's certainly when I had sex. I was 16, 17 when I had sex. So like, and I had sex with someone who was my age. So I was perfectly capable of making that decision. And I think that, I made that decision at a time that was right for me. Everyone has, loses their virginity at a different time. But I had decent sex education, I would say, from school. I think that's a little bit different of a topic when it comes to like my parents, because I don't really remember much about my parents and I ever having like a serious conversation on sex.
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't have really any conversation. And then there's just one time where I was just going over one of my ex-girlfriend's house, and my dad driving me there was just like, no sex.
No, like, are you kidding me?
I was just like, and there was no conversation before that. Nothing prompted this, and I'm just like,
it's funny because he assumed you knew exactly what that was.
Right, and yeah. He had to have made that assumption, and it just shows that like he doesn't like, he just says, but he doesn't. Well, both my parents do this. He just says, but doesn't like teach, or doesn't like sit down to explain.
There's no education. There's just don't do it.
It's like parenting without education.
Yeah,
I don't know how to describe it, but
that sounds terrible.
Yeah, especially for someone like you, where you say like you're like so curious. If someone tells you not to do something, or you're always asking the why.
Yeah, I always want to know why. I like answers.
And my dad was not good at giving whys a lot.
Well, my parents weren't always either, because they were sometimes just annoyed that I was asking it all.
Yeah.
Mostly when I was younger, but yeah, there's always that curiosity, for sure. My mom's like that too. She's just very curious about things. But I think that education is very, very important when it comes to sex, because like losing my virginity, I lost my virginity to a woman. So there was what did you say?
Nothing.
Sure. There was absolute, like, when I say basically none, there was like maybe 1% of the sex education that I got was queer. Like it was not like, it was very, very like heteronormative for sure. And I was like, well, it would have been nice to have some sort of like queer education or something when it comes to sex. Like at least when I'm sure like maybe it's better now. I would hope it's better now, hopefully. But when we went through school, I know that my like sex ed or like health class was very in depth, but it neglected those parts of sexuality. Like they just assumed that everybody was straight, basically.
What state were you in?
California.
Okay, because I was going to be like, if this is Texas.
No, you were lucky if you got like the condom on a banana thing in Texas. I didn't have sex ed at all in Texas, but at that point, I was like well past the point where I would have. Like I was like a junior. And when I had like my very comprehensive sex ed class, and when I say that, this wasn't like one semester you have gym, one semester you have health. This was an entire class, a whole year of, learning about not just like the body, but, watching birth scenes and, learning about like all the kinds of STDs and getting shown pictures and getting like doing, like a CPR class and just all kinds of stuff. That doesn't really have to do with sex ed necessarily, but the class itself was literally called like human interaction. But it was a glorified health class of just knowing like the basics of health and wellness and stuff. But definitely, and we talked about like diet and things like that too, but largely it was focused on sex, which was cool, but yeah, definitely neglected some pretty big like sexual stuff. Like there wasn't any queer stuff. There wasn't any any talk really at all about abortion, which I think is an important thing to talk about, like in school too, because even if you don't like it, it's an option that exists, and I think everyone should be able to know their options.
Right.
You know, especially in a setting that's meant to be educational.
Right.
Not like pushing one agenda or another, just being like, hey, if this were to happen to you, or if you found yourself in this situation, here's some like information where you could potentially help yourself or help somebody else, you know. You know, like I feel like I don't see any negatives to educating people and like giving them information. But that's certainly not the case for a lot of people. A lot of people advocate for abstinence only or very limited sex ed.
Yeah, it's a recipe for disaster.
It really does seem that way. Because it's like, it's that whole kind of cliche, but true. You want what you can't have. Or in this case, maybe you want what you don't know.
Right. And like, you don't want to listen to your parents.
Oh, no. No, like...
You want to rebel.
Yeah, for real. I was never like a super rebellious teenager, but I was definitely more open as a teenager than my parents were, I would say, probably. Like, or maybe they wanted me to. There are definitely things I thought and still think now, you know, over 10 years later, that, you know, still resonate. Like, I still was very sex positive then, still very sex positive now. I don't think there's any shame in sexuality whatsoever. Like, as long as everything's consensual and healthy and, you know, everyone is all right with what's going on, I don't see any problem. And there's no like coercion. I don't see any problem with really any of that. Any sexual anything, like whatever kink, whatever, like it's fine as long as you're okay with it. And I feel like my parents at that point, like there's a lot of things that even now they don't know, like when it comes to, well, what I've done, but also like, you know, how sex positive I really am.
Right.
You know, like we've talked about that.
Yeah.
Like if we've had kids, like I wouldn't personally care about them having sex as long as they were doing it safely.
Right. We would educate them.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I feel like, first off, talking to them about it would probably be kind of difficult because, you know, kids are like, ew, I don't want to talk to my parents about sex. But also, like, educating them, especially from the start, not never talking about sex and then suddenly at 14 or 13 bringing it up and being like, hey, here's a sex talk. Not that shit. Like from the very beginning, being honest with them about it. You know, from when they're talking and they're asking questions at like 3, 4, 5, you know, be honest with them.
No stork.
No
stories.
stupid stork stories. Call genitals what they actually fucking are. No stupid ass nicknames. Like, call a vagina and a penis a penis.
You don't like the term private parts, right?
I don't mind that term. I think it's fine. I personally wouldn't use it.
Would you teach it?
I would probably teach the concept, but I wouldn't teach the word, I don't think. Like, I wouldn't say these are your privates. I don't know. That just didn't roll off my tongue. But
privates versus private parts, I think,
yeah,
are two different sound. They have two different sounds to them.
Yeah. Well, I think like at least in my life, people use that interchangeably. So,
no, it seems very separate to me. I would say, I would be comfortable saying these are your private parts to our son. This is your penis.
Yeah.
Daughter. Vagina.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, how did you think babies were made before you knew about sex?
I don't really know. I don't think I had any concept. I only have a memory of not knowing and then knowing. I kind of figured it out. I was pretty perceptive, like as a child, because I watched a lot of movies I probably shouldn't have watched because my parents really didn't give two shits. I feel like they probably thought like, oh, you don't get it. Like, you won't get it. Like, you're a kid. But like, I watched those movies and I kind of got the gist.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I was watching like things like Austin Powers and shit. Like my dad would fucking like just like watch them with me and he'd think they were hysterical. And
I somehow like definitely I somehow I guess avoided anything that was like super explicit, I guess.
Mm-hmm. By your own choice or by your parents?
I think by my parents, but like I wasn't at the stage where like I was even like aware of that. That's how little I had seen, so I didn't even conceptualize that. And I know I told you this before, but how I thought babies were made was true love.
That's adorable.
And I think this is what every parent wants, and it worked on me because I was hook, line, and sinker.
Literally so cute.
This is kind of a very wholesome take.
It's very wholesome.
Like I thought, two people to have a baby, two people had to be in love with each other, and it had to be
you had to tick that
true
box.
love. And this was back when like I was still being raised Catholic, and I thought, when two people are truly in love and it was true love, God would bless them with a baby. Yeah, and I just thought it was if any physicality part, I thought it was just just kissing, like true love's kiss.
And that was it. They like
I didn't know anything about fucking.
Yeah.
But yeah. Sorry, future kids, if you're listening to this.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm your mom. You know me.
We probably.
You know what I'm like.
Oh my god. Yeah, you know what she's like. I'm gonna blame it all on her. But no.
That's fine.
Oh Lord.
I hope you appreciate this.
Please don't think differently of me. But yeah, that was how I thought.
That's very sweet.
Babies were made.
I mean, I really have no memory of when I put the pieces together, except for maybe when I remember that I knew before I was 10, at least, because I remember playing Sims, and there was like the whole like woohoo feature, and I knew what that was. Like I remember being like, oh, they're gonna have kids now. I'm like, cool. I want a baby in the game. Let's do that. Like, let's make my Sims have a baby. And so like I remember being 10 and like thinking that. So I must
thinking what?
Thinking like, oh, what they're doing is going to result in a baby.
And what were they doing? They were woohooing?
Well, they were having sex, obviously.
You thought that at 10 years old? They're like,
yeah.
oh, the woohoo is that's the sex.
Yeah. Like I remember thinking like, oh, I knew that.
Yeah.
What
Women
that was.
mature faster than men.
So I knew like before 10 that was a thing, and that was, like that was how babies were made and things like that. I didn't know. I don't know if I knew like what pieces like fit together, but I feel like I knew like the general gist of like there was some sort of like physical action that made a baby happen kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't know like the sperm goes into, like sperm, penis, vagina, sperm, make baby type situation. So
Yeah. Well, again, that just goes to show the education system, in particular the sex ed that public school gives you.
Mm-hmm. And varying degrees of that for sure.
Right. And that just plays another big factor in the whole problem with this divisive debate between people who are pro-choice and then people who are pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just goes like deeper and deeper into the problems of our country. And
every issue is very divisive.
Right. And I just don't know where to even begin with trying to even attempt to solve those problems, but I know going backwards ain't it.
And going backwards definitely is not it. It's exhausting though, like listening to things and keeping up with things, because it's like just more of the same, and it just seems like nothing ever really changes all that much unless things are going backwards, and that's particularly frustrating.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just like, why are we still doing this right now? Like, and it doesn't give me that much hope. I'm not like a super optimist by any means. Like, you know that. But I especially but I also don't want to be overly pessimistic about like the state of the country, the state of the like world, or like even just like generally, like how are we like processing things as like a collective consciousness, like in the United States. And I feel like that is like not going great, considering we all are on like different like planes of understanding, and we don't agree on like a lot of things, and every issue is very contentious. And
For a country that has so many people that boast about our freedoms, our rights, it's a little I don't know, a little hypocritical to be celebrating our Independence Day when we just lost.
We just took away rights. We just took
a lot of freedoms.
Yeah, like it's just an ironic place to be. It's like, yeah, let's celebrate our independence and our freedom, but let's not give women the right to make the choices about their own bodies. Like, it's like, obviously Independence Day is not in the context of like Roe versus Wade or like bodily autonomy, but people certainly talk about it as if it is. Like, the 4th of July is about freedom, period, not specifically about that we were separated from England and officially our own country now, kind of thing. Like, obviously that's what Independence Day is for the United States, but like in a broader context, it's definitely about like an overall freedom, our freedom to do as we please, essentially, within reason.
Right.
And well, now women and people with uteruses cannot do as they wish with their own bodies. So that's great.
Yeah. And just another thing that's just so I find so hypocritical is like, yes, we have been saying my body, my choice, but in the midst of the pandemic, people have twisted that phrase to justify themselves not wearing a mask, not getting a vaccine. The vaccine part, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But then, like, wearing a mask.
It's common courtesy, really.
Right. And, like, you do still have your bodily autonomy of not having to wear a mask. You just have to know that will come with consequences.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You're still free to do that.
Yeah.
But people are also, on the flip side, free to deny you services and whatnot.
Exactly.
For the, I guess, lack of a better term, the greater good.
Yeah. And it's I think people sometimes kind of like misconstrued like what freedom means. It's like,
oh yeah,
it's very much like, using that example, it's like you can't just like do whatever the fuck you want, like not wearing a mask. Like, you can't just like walk into a grocery store in the middle of the pandemic and assume that everyone's going to be fucking totally fine with you not wearing a mask. Like, people are going to say something to you. And the fact that these people would often just like freak the fuck out over that and being like, oh, my rights, my freedom, my whatever the hell. Right. And it's like,
right. Sorry to interject, but like, then that's where they'll go like, oh, what about my
body, my choice.
My body, my choice.
Yeah.
I almost was like, my rights, my freedom. What was it again?
My rights, my freedom.
I forgot the term.
I mean, yeah,
my
that
body,
too.
my choice. They'll like start spewing that around, and I'm just like, see, this is the difference. You're only using that when it's like
convenient for you.
Convenient for you, and this is just you never cared about that when the people that have originally used it were fighting for their rights and continue to fight for their rights.
The irony.
Yeah, you're only using it when it's convenient for you.
Exactly. And, make sense for them. I know, I hate that.
To justify their shitty, selfish takes.
Yeah. It's frustrating. That is also very frustrating. It's just, I don't get it. I really just don't understand it. And it's like, it's fine if you think that it's a violation of your rights or like whatever you think. But at the end of the day, it's like, that doesn't negate the fact that other people have the freedom to throw you the fuck out of their establishment if they want to. They also have the freedom to not serve you because you're not in compliance with their current rules.
Right.
So it's like the whole no shirt, no shoes, no service thing. It's like...
Yep, same concept.
Yeah, it's a very similar concept to that. It's like, if you're not wearing a mask, well, they're also not going to let you in without shoes or a shirt. So it's like, come on. Like,
yeah.
Just
and like,
be respectful.
If they just randomly started doing that, yeah, I'd be like, what the fuck? But in the midst of a global pandemic,
yeah,
it makes
100% sense.
1,000% sense.
And even so, like, I think if someone were to just like randomly do that now, or even before the pandemic happened, like I would still be like, weird, but I would still be like respectful of it, because I'm like, oh, maybe, but that's just kind of who I am, to be like, oh, like try to think through other people's like processes and be like, oh, well, maybe they have someone who's like sick or something, or like maybe they have somebody who's immune compromised, or like maybe they have somebody, who they're, they want to like mitigate any of the potential germs or whatever. Maybe they're just germophobic, like period, or have like OCD or, whatever. There's a million reasons why someone could potentially want to be wearing a mask, or want other people around them to be wearing masks as well. And especially if it's in a store, I'm like, yeah, if I want to buy your shit that's here, I'm going to be respectful and put on a mask and then buy the shit I need and get the fuck out of there. Like, it's just common courtesy, and it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree.
And the fact that you're screaming about fucking not wearing one is like, wow, first world problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, what a privileged person you are.
Yeah.
Like, to be thinking about that. Just that.
Yeah. So, if you were fucking screaming about my body, my choice then, you better be screaming about it now, too. Or else you're a fucking hypocrite.
Yeah. But there's plenty of those, so.
Plenty.
Yeah.
Plenty to go around. But yeah, as we sort of wrap up this conversation, I know you and I have had our conversations, but what role do you think men specifically play in this?
Well, I certainly don't think that men should stay silent. I think that, like, some people say and have said that, like, men don't have any like right to say anything at all when it comes to like this issue. And in some ways, I think
the spirit is there for that comment.
Yeah. Like, I understand like where that comment is coming from, because it's like, men don't have a right to say yes or no on the issue in terms of like...
They just mean men don't want to control...
Yeah.
Shouldn't have an opinion that controls
what women
a woman's
can
body.
or can't do.
Right.
Yeah. But I do think men's place in the conversation is to be like supportive. Like those
to
voices...
stand up for these human rights.
Yeah. These voices should be a very supportive... These voices should be very supportive voices. And I don't want to say, like, if you're not supportive, like, shut the fuck up, but also kind of. Because it's like, we need men to stand up and say something, because unfortunately, still to this day, the patriarchy is very strong, and men are listened to. And the shitty part about it is that if this were men, this wouldn't even be a problem. There wouldn't be.
Oh, yeah.
This would never happen, ever. Because it would just be an automatic right that men have because men are men. Like, if this was a man's issue, no.
If men were the ones carrying babies.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen.
So fast would, like, there be laws, I guess, protecting.
Or just simply, it would have never existed in the first place. This would never have been a discussion.
Right, or...
It would have been automatically protected.
Or, like, the amount of, like, contraceptives for men would be so... Well, it would just be, like, more than what it is now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, if positively, anyway, men should take a more active role in being advocates for women. Because I think that's very important. Like, we need men who are more than willing to, like, stand up for, like, the women in their life and, like, give their opinions and their stories. Because it's important that other men who maybe aren't as involved or, like, don't understand it as well, or simply don't even think that they like that they don't even care about it because they don't think it affects them. I think maybe if other men were to go to those men and be like, hey, like, no, this affects you because of, like, X, Y, and Z, then, I feel like that's worthwhile. I don't feel like shutting out men out of the conversation completely is a good way to go about it. Like, I mean, female voices are obviously, like, very important, and, people who, just anybody really who has a uterus that this affects, very important.
But often not respected.
But often not.
Not in the same way.
Yeah, not in the same way.
Men are respected, and there plays that male privilege aspect as well.
Exactly. And yeah, that fucking sucks, but right now it's like the world we live in,
Right.
like, and I think it's important, like, just speaking as, like, myself, like, as, a woman who was, like, affected by this whole situation, I feel like I would want the men in my life to, like, stand up and say something and to say that they don't like this or disagree with this, that this is, like, a shitty decision. Like, for you or, like, my, like, our friends or, like, my dad or my brother, like, to say something about this and be like, wow, that's really fucking shitty. It, like, I feel like to not say anything at all is, like, just kind of being a part of the problem and, like, of either that or like, avoiding the issue.
Right.
I don't know. Like, what do you think about that? Like, do you think that...
Well, I will say this. I will fight for your rights.
Well, thank you.
And to any potential future daughters listening, just know that, yeah, I will fight for your rights. And just know that even if your country may not value you and may not give you the freedoms and rights you deserve, know that we will fight for you.
I think that's a nice thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
We need more men saying it.
Right. And to the men listening, whether that's anyone now or future sons and or whatnot, know that this issue affects you. Know that this is a human rights issue. We all have come from a woman, and the woman we come from also came from another woman, and then that woman came from another woman. And so this is something that will affect so many generations to come, and just overall affects everyone.
It does, and I think we need to start looking at it that way, that it affects everybody. It just doesn't affect people with uteruses. It affects literally everybody, everywhere, all the time. It's necessary to put this in a perspective of it, like, in that way, that it does affect everybody, and this isn't just, a person with uteruses issue. Like, don't just shove it all on us, and be like, hey, this is your problem. You got to deal with it.
No, this is our problem.
We need to do it together.
Yes. And I'll leave us with this. It is long overdue that we start empowering women and letting them have a voice and have a choice. We all deserve better. We all deserve the right of bodily autonomy, and at the very least, not have less rights than someone who is deceased. I want to end with referencing a couple TikToks I watched. First one was by comedian Bill Burr. And I want to preface this by saying, I understand he's a comedian and he's making jokes. He's allowed to do that. I'm not directing any hate towards him or suggesting he needs to be canceled or anything like that. But I did see a clip of his stance on abortion. He was basically on the fence. He believes in my body, my choice, but he also believes abortion equals killing a baby. He then goes on to say this quote in regards to people saying it's not a baby yet. That would be like if I was making a cake and I poured some batter in a pan and I put it in the oven, and then 5 minutes later you came by and you grabbed the pan, you threw it across the floor. It wasn't a cake yet, but it would have been. This is funny because I've seen this analogy but on the flip side, where it was a meme showing a bowl of flour and text saying, "This is a cake." Obviously, it's not a cake. Yet. And here's the difference I want to point out. In Bill Burr's analogy, from the get-go, he has intent to make a cake. He's intentionally pouring batter, putting it in the oven, and expects a cake in the end. But that's not the case for everyone. Not everyone has intent to conceive a child when having sex. Accidents happen even when all the precautions are taken. And it's really quite dehumanizing to make someone carry a child that they didn't want as a consequence for having sex. We should all have the choice to take that pan out of the oven. Last TikTok I'm going to reference is an honest shocker. I never thought I'd be agreeing with this person. But as former Vice President Mike Pence said,
if you're going to be pro-life, you need to be pro-adoption. The cost to adopt a child in the United States can be as much as $70,000 to the family. It should not cost the average American worker more than a year's worth of wages to adopt a child.
Yes, Mike Pence. Dare I say, preach. I guess I just want to end on the sentiment that a decision to get an abortion is one that no one takes lightly. And if that's a decision you feel you will never make, that is your choice. But don't take that away from someone else. I hope this was worth your time, because it was definitely worth mine. Until the next entry, keep wondering, and go all in.